In your adjudication hearing, it was found to be true that you engaged in delinquent conduct. By your own admission and the evidence presented, you assaulted a public servant, which is a third-degree felony. It is the finding of this court that you need to undergo rehabilitation. Based on the evidence shared, I am recommending a 12-month probation period for your rehabilitation and to ensure adequate protection to the public. Based on your social history report and the findings that you cannot be provided the quality of care and level of support and supervision needed to meet the conditions of probation, the court is requiring out-of-home placement for rehabilitation.
What does this mean?
You will be placed in the custody of the Chief Probation Officer at a post-adjudicated facility that specializes in anger management. The length of time in treatment will depend on your success in treatment and typically lasts about 6 months.
Can't be.
Your parents will be able to visit you once a week during that 6-month period. If you are successful while in treatment and follow all the conditions of your rehabilitation, the court will consider releasing you to your family after that 6-month period. The court may also suspend the remaining probation based on the success of your treatment. Do you understand this court's decision?
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
The juvenile justice system is supposed to be different than the criminal justice system. It's supposed to be a system that is set up to rehabilitate and support youth.
Recognize that that is not what that is for. It is not. It says correctional. It is not. It is meant to get them to prison. That's what I experienced. Hi, my name is Cherie Kamen, and I am a former juvenile correctional officer for the state of Texas.
My name is Kelly Opat. I'm founding executive director of Collective Action for Youth. Even though it is intended to be a rehabilitative system, it really mirrors our criminal justice system. And especially with younger youth and youth who have more minor charges but might not have the familial support to help them navigate, tend to get caught up more in the system and interact more with some young people who have had more experiences on the street. And so it ends up being a place where young people are learning how to survive criminal justice and normalizes that experience for them.
Full disclosure, this was over 20 years ago for me. But when I was in there, it did not look like it was meant to help the kids. It was meant to get them to where they were going to start making money for the state.
It also absolutely disproportionately includes Black and brown children, youth who are dual status. Girls are overrepresented. Black girls are overrepresented in particular. And it really tells us a lot about how we police Black bodies and young Black bodies and how that starts at a very young age for children who become involved in these systems.
They are really not allowed to make mistakes. We're meant to be perfect. And I think that many of times when it comes to Black and brown children, that the consequences are way more severe than they need to be. The system itself does not give lean to, and in fact, I think it thrives off of whatever toxicity is going on within their life. So it thrives off of that. That's what helps fuel that system. Oh, you're not, you may be a kid, but you're not a good kid, right? So you deserve to be where you are. So it really thrives off of that, and thrives off of the inequality of the economy, right? Cops know where to look, right? I know where to look to go get people to bring in.
It, similarly to the criminal justice system, is frequently one of the only places that individuals who don't have access to a lot of resources or healthcare resources have to go to receive mental health care, and where parents feel like they have to turn to receive support for behavioral and mental health needs that their children are having. And that is not the best place for children to get that.
I believe Black and brown kids are sentenced more harshly just because racism in the system. Like, plain and simple, I think we're targeted. Just we're like, anything that we do simple in fragments that we have, like we could have a bad day at school and we could act out and we're expended, or suspended, expelled, we're, put in school suspension. Like, they immediately punish us instead of like giving us the opportunity to talk and have some counseling sessions or anything. I just think it's just systematic racism.
I mean, it's very easy to get into the system, I think. My experience, I was 14, and got into an incident with a police officer, someone that was supposed to be protecting me not being aware of what was going on, and in a full altercation, like a full-blown fist fight, in the middle of a cafeteria where all the school could see. And so that was traumatizing. Not only was it traumatizing for me, but then I got arrested, in front of everybody, and was drugged out of that literally. Kicking and screaming. And that just kind of propelled me into the juvenile justice system, going to being on probation. And then
it tracks you like down the line.
Exactly. Yeah, not understanding like the severity of my crime, or of my, and not understanding the punishment. Being in foster care, I was like acting out, and I didn't realize that was a violation of probation. And here I go being arrested again. Just for not, on my first time ever being even, arrested. It's harsh punishment. Now I'm going to juvenile for a year.
My situation, you said you were 14?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was 16. And so, I was with 3 older individuals. I was in an aggravated robbery charge. And so we were downtown just kind of joyriding. And I was in the front of the vehicle, and an individual in the back just kind of pulled out a gun, robbed somebody, wasn't loaded or anything. And so he got a pack of cigarettes and a cell phone, and for that I received a 10-year sentence. And so everybody else, my 3 peers, I was only child. And so me being 16, everybody else like 17, 18, 19, me, whatever, give me my time, like not trying to cooperate or anything like that. The victim of the crime didn't even identify me, didn't press charges, but the state picked it up. And so them being adults and they can bond out, they were able to fight their case from the outside. And so me being 16, they said you could do 25 to 40 in TDCJ, or you could do 10 years in TYC. And so I signed for 10 years. I did 4 years on a 36-month minimum, and I did 6 years on adult parole. And so something that happened in like 60 seconds, didn't have a gun, it wasn't premeditated or anything like that. I, got off it when I was 26. I went in when I was 16. And so, I've just seen cases where like kids can steal a bike and have a BB gun in the backpack. That's robbery. That's aggravated. Like there's just so many cases for Black and brown youth where if you don't have proper representation in court, if you don't got no family, if you ain't got no money, you finna do some time.
Why you feel like we're targeted more?
It's slavery. I mean, we know what slavery was. That wasn't a long time ago. And now we get free labor through the incarceration and the penal system. You know what I mean? When I was in there, I was getting 50 cents an hour working in the cafeteria, and people were, you can make license plates. You could do agriculture, horticulture. There's real labor off, Black and brown folks. We make up the prison population. I think at least like the courts, it's capitalism built off competition. It's not really who's really right or wrong, is who has a better argument. The prosecutor, the defense attorney, you know what I mean? Who has the bread, you know what I'm saying? And so now that we're all incarcerated and we know it's cyclical, right? Or the recidivism rate, once you get out, if you don't have a strong support system, if you don't have a plan, if you can't pass your drug test, if you can't maintain a job, if you can't pay those restitution fees, you go back. You go back. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And now on top of you being, you're labeled as a felon,
right.
Or now you have a record, which makes all of that even more impossible.
Yeah. And I'm a determined sentence offender. And so they told me by signing a plea bargain is good because you won't go to the penitentiary. But signing a plea bargain means I can never get rid of that felony off my record in comparison to an adult who could if they weren't
And
determined.
you 16 years old, how would you be able to understand that?
Yeah, like who explained from school to say,
exactly.
Down the line.
One of the things that I remember as a juvenile correction officer is you meet a lot of kids. And I remember having a conversation, and one of the boys told me, I was really surprised, but he told me that he had to go to the bathroom and he went behind a tree. And that's why he was in now the system, is because he had to go use the restroom behind the tree. What happened is he had to use the restroom. He was not near a bathroom, and there were other kids around. And he's a kid himself, and went behind a tree, and someone saw him and said that he was, what it was is indecent exposure. He was also clocked with being a sex offender because he exposed himself amidst children. And so he was a sex offender. He had to register as a sex offender. This particular child was 15 years old.
First offense?
Yeah, it was his very first. I remember being mortified and thinking of my son, and even to this day it affects me. It is amazing to me how just one occurrence, it doesn't matter how trivial it is, even, as just going to the restroom, having to use the restroom, you have to be very mindful of your surroundings and the people who are surrounding you and watching you, because they can take it in. They can change your life in such a way that you can't rectify it. It doesn't matter if they're a kid or not, and that's what's scary to me. That really scared me and really shook me up, and that was well over 20 years ago. It really is a sentence for these kids. It really is a sentence. It's not a treatment. They do have counselors there, but it's a sentence. You are in a detention center. It's a sentence. We call it a kid's jail. It really is a sentence, and it is very easy to get your time extended. Juvenile correctional officers have the power. Can just give you started a fight, I'm gonna write you up. You did this, I'm gonna write you up. And once you do that, once you start going down that route, and depending how old this person is, this child, I was in it with males, so all these boys, and depending on how old you were, if you had charges that racked up that elongated your sentence, you would not be aging out. You would be going to prison, and then that's a whole different ball game.
I wish I would have had somebody that stayed with me, like no matter what home I went to, that just kind of stayed with me, like some kind of guardian, I guess, per se, that made sure I had the support from my education to my diet to my hobbies to whatever it is, knowing that I didn't have a steady family. I think a lot of times there's kind of an incentive to adopt sometimes, when you look at a kid's measurables or how bad they are, if they take meds, what their grades are, you might not want that child.
But I think as a foster parent, because I'm a parent now, I would definitely, I wouldn't be a foster parent if I wasn't sincere. Because a lot of them do it for the money. And that's a small incentive, but you got to look at the bigger picture, especially for when Black and brown youth, we're predominantly the ones that are coming into foster homes. We are all over the system. So I think that if you don't want to be a foster parent, you shouldn't. And, they should give them like what are assessments?
Oh,
You know
yeah,
what I'm saying?
absolutely.
Like to like your level of
And
care.
measure
Like
their
they,
success,
yeah,
right.
definitely.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
should be, tested as well, or like about mentally, because some of them, aren't, and physically. I went to foster parents where they were sickly.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like I wouldn't, as a foster parent, if I was sick, I wouldn't, try to take care of younger children.
Right. Like if I was a foster parent, I can imagine myself with little Dieter. I would really pay attention to my needs, my wants, just being hands-on with extracurricular activities. I think a lot of times after school, it just felt kind of, I won't say punitive, it was just kind of like in solitude. I would love to have something in place just to keep my mind occupied and my creativity and my imagination. I think those formative years as you're growing up are the most important, and that was way before I was incarcerated, way before the age of 16. And so that's when I was developing, from conversation with like sexual awareness, reproduction. I would have had those conversations. I would have loved to have had somebody had those conversations with me, and I didn't. I just had to kind of figure out the world on my own, and it was just kind of like, so why are y'all here? You know what I mean? Like, so yeah.
I agree with the after-school activities. I think that's extremely important because when you're in foster care, they don't trickle that into the budget, and think about how important that. I didn't even go to prom or dances or none of that. So like a lot of I think I'm trying to make up for that now that I'm older, and then that's something I identify with my son, like because he's 6, like he needs things to do to keep him active, and he's developing, and he's curious. So I mean, I think that's extremely important. Yeah, after-school activities during school, even school clothes. Like
I was gonna say hygiene, all that.
yeah,
Clothing vouchers.
clothing vouchers is like the little money that they give you is yeah, it's shameful.
Right.
I mean, and I don't even know if I would encourage somebody to become a foster parent. You can always be a leader rather than taking on the parental role, because there's that title again, right? So when you throw on foster parent, you may or may not think that you have to behave in a certain way, but just being a leader for the kid and taking them in under your wing, especially the older ones, and just leading by example and showing them the level of consistency and pointing them in the direction of the skills that these kids aren't exposed to, just taking on a leadership role while this kid is still young enough to listen and be navigated, just take it that way. Some of these kids, they don't have parents, right? So they may need that extra push, that leader in their life that's going to help drive them to what their purpose is. And if they don't have that spark or that purpose or that direction, then how else can we better help them? So as a community, really talking with these kids to get to their heart of heart, and then pointing them in direction to get the support that they need so they can continue to walk in that spark.
Hi, my name is Courtney Dykstra, and I'm a foster adopt mom. It's easy to take in a baby and not know, and thinking like, hey, I'm going to bring this baby up and they're going to have my foundation and my ethics and all this stuff. And when you get a teenager, I don't want to say that they have their ways set, but they kind of do. You don't know what they've been exposed to. And I just recommend that you need a strong person that can say, hey, I'm going to fight for this kid, because you need to prepare them for the real world. What did your parents teach you? A lot of these kids don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know how to do their own laundry. They don't know what it's like to cook a meal. And these are all foundations that they're going to need when they turn 18. So when they turn 18 and they leave CPS's care, they're on their own. And what do they have? They have nothing that can sit there and set them up for success. Yes, is it going to be easy? No, it's going to be hard. Are you going to cry? Are you going to have mixed emotions? Are you going to wish, what was I thinking? Yeah, but you know what? That's okay, because there's going to be an army of people around you. Surround yourself with a good support system that is going to help you get through this. People that you can call on and ask for advice or just vent to, that understand what you're going through. My recommendation for any foster parent that has a rebellious teenager is to stay consistent and let the child know that they're always loved. I will say that my foster adopt mom, I was hard on her, very hard. And one thing I always remember is that she didn't give me up. She never threatened to send me back. She never threatened to kick me out. She spent more time with me. And at the time, I didn't want that, right? I kind of wanted my space. But looking back, like, that was the best thing she could have done, because I was crying out for that. That's what I needed. I just didn't see it.
Texas is an interesting state when it comes to juveniles and policy. And so I know there's a lot of energy around like raise the lowest age and raise the age from 17 and all that. But I still haven't seen much go through for determining sentence offenders, you know? And so, or even determining like sex offenders, you know, not even, a lot of times like just any felony as a youth or an adolescent. You know, there's just too many court-appointed attorneys that influence you or just kind of try to convince you to sign a plea bargain. And they say it's the best move for you down the line, and it's not. Because when you want to join the military, when you're trying to do anything, you know, in the county, a city job, anything like that, that record shows up. And, you know, it kind of forces you to do a line of work that's always like chasing a grant, you know, grant type funded work or something entrepreneurial. Or labor, or something you don't like. Yeah. You know, I remember when I first got out, I was working in the kitchen, probably peeling like 500 potatoes in 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Because I was so limited to thinking that's all I could do, because I was working as a cook when I was incarcerated. And, you know, your record showing up everywhere, it's discouraging, you know, because it's like, so why are we sending kids to jail if it's not to rehabilitate? That's supposed to be a second chance for anybody, not really even a kid, but for anybody, but more so a youth. And so once you're released, you're like, okay, so I did all that time in there to learn trades, to get my GED, my high school diploma, for what? I took all that time to do what? Because now I got all this parole and I have to be employed or I have to be in college. College ain't everybody's speed, you know what I mean? So if you're working, it's like, okay, I want to be whatever, in philanthropy, a banker, XYZ, but I can't because I have something from 15, 20 years ago on my record that I can't sue.
I don't think that I would have known that my juvenile record would still show up unless you all gave me the opportunity to like say, hey, like I would have never known that, I don't think.
Right.
I didn't even realize it was as severe as it was, and it was hindering me the way that it was, because I worked like mediocre things that I really didn't, I wasn't interested in doing. I mean, I wanted to go to college and I've been, but you know, I didn't get a chance to like step into this work until I was introduced to you all, and I think it's more so where I'm going to be, but because we're more understanding of people's situation, and you know, we're like acceptance. We understand that if we hire youth or individuals that have lived experience, that they will have a background, and I think we have to continue to advocate for that, like in other aspects of like philanthropy and you know activism, just because it is a real thing. Like nothing about us without us, and when with us comes with you know severe backgrounds and things like that you have to kind of hurdles we got to jump over.
I've been with the Juvenile Probation Department off and on for about 15 years. So in the beginning, I would like to just kind of say that it was more outcome or results driven, whereas now it is definitely more compassionate. We're looking at why the kiddo came into the criminal justice system in the first place. I like to describe it as hard work, whereas before it used to probably be hard work with kind of making a decision as to what was going to happen. But now we're definitely looking at the heart and the logistics as to why that kid came into the criminal justice system in the first place. To me, I look at every single case as if it's brand new. It's all individualized to me. I get a chance to read some of their story, but I like for that kid to express their story to me personally, because nobody is the better author than the person who's telling the story, right? So does some of what comes out within previous reports, is that true? Yeah, because the kid ends up talking about it, but are they criminals and those sorts of things? I look at each kid as an individual, without a title or a name that's associated with them. I'm not going to call anyone a criminal unless they're doing criminal activity. So I definitely like to put a separation between the labels, because these kids, they end up coming through the system and they have enough labels coming in with them already. We're committed to making sure that it's not a cliche system. We want to ensure that every kid has a successful outcome. So by doing that, we make sure that whatever plan that we come up with, surrounding the frontline workers of that team, whether it be the probation officer, the caseworker, or whoever it is, the supervisor, we're making sure that everybody remains in constant communication, that everybody understands what the plan is. We talk about that plan 2 or 3 times a week at sometimes, before we even present that at the level of the attorney, the prosecutor, the judges, or any of those things. It's just constant communication and layers of support to help best direct that kid's potential outcome.
Some of the activism that we do that's meaningful for me is us going back to our community and making them aware of that they have dual status youth in the community and what they can do to support them. Like that we want, and then when we do identify youth as in the community, that we can help them get their record expunged.
Absolutely.
We're here to get them connected to resources that they feel that they need, not only them and their family. Because a lot of times people forget about how the justice system affects families and how they create a disconnect.
Absolutely, and explain to a youth early on, like a non-disclosure, expungement, and sealing, what you're eligible for. Let's help you out. If that, if you actually end up incarcerated, like what your options are, what this charge looks like. I just feel like there isn't a lot of support, in the courtroom, in the system, or after, once you're released, and so. It's hard. And I also think, with legal aid clinics, a lot of these organizations should, even if it's a minor infraction, help youth clean their records up.
And just also preparing attorneys to better advocate for youth and
Absolutely.
be more informative and let them know, hey, this is exactly what you're trying, and not just pressure them into a deal.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, if you even get an opportunity to meet your attorney,
Yeah.
So that's what we need to train them more on, how to be better, better dual status attorneys, better attorneys, period, to work for us, not against us.
Absolutely.
So we do our best to coach the kids and whoever that kid's working with within those community resources to start building that relationship. And it's just continuous relationship building. It's like a layered level of relationship from there. So of course, whenever our kids are getting ready to age out of the system, we do work really closely with the caseworker to make sure that they have all of the documentation of what they need to provide to whoever it is that's going to be working with this kid long term. If the kiddo decides to remain in CPS custody past their 17th or 18th birthday, we make sure that, or the probation department makes sure that individual has the information that they need in order to ensure that this kiddo's cases are closed. Now, that is a process of that individual returning back to court so that they can request for their records to be sealed. But the probation officers, or the ones that are on my team, they do their due diligence with making sure that people know the proper steps whenever those cases are getting closed.
My hope is that we live in a country, in a county, in a state that no longer has the option to incarcerate children. So instead of punishing and trying to erase behaviors and fix what people are doing, what we really want to see is uplifting the powers and the strengths that young people have and the strategies that they figured out how to survive some really challenging situations, looking beyond who we think as the perfect family, whatever that is, really being able to look at families as they are and friends and family structures that kids actually want, and really being able to be supportive of that and understanding that there's no cookie cutter way that a family should look. There's no cookie cutter way that a child should move through the world, and that it's not our position to judge them as right or wrong, but it's our position to give the tools and the resources and listen to what children are actually telling us that they want and need to be able to provide that for them. I've seen so much success and just people being able to come out of these really challenging situations and really restrictive environments to become incredible young adults. Your voice matters, your life matters, and we have so much to learn from you. And so that it's really about coming out on the other side, understanding how important your voice and your experience is to making it better for every generation to come.